Hello everyone. So today we are creating a new series, and this series will be about Android animation. So till now, Android has arrived a long way, has passed a long way. The road was not that difficult though, but they hadn't achieved a lot till now. If we compare the animation of Android with other things like game like Unity engines, they're far behind from them. So we'll see how far they have come till now. So we'll talk about first about their whole history, and then we'll talk about we'll actually discuss and we'll give some example how to create this type of animation in Android, and yeah, you will enjoy, I think. And if you follow the whole series, you will understand about all the thing about the Android animation. I hope you will enjoy. So let's do it. So first, I have drawn some what's it called? Some type of gesture on my notebook so that I can discuss. But I'm sorry, I can't really paint this whole thing into a digital things because it will take a lot of time. So let's just consider this thing and go ahead. So first, our today's topic is animation on Android, and Android or Google uh, sometimes address these things as motion. Okay, so on the very beginning, and in the version of Android 1, they have this type of animation. They call this animation as Android View animation. So this is the superclass for the animation. So if you want to use the animation in your project, you have to use this superclass or use this API. So they had supported the things like scale, object scale, move, fade, and rotate. So they are pretty restricted, and the common class that was used was the animation set. So this was a very common class that has been used, that had been used on Android animation in the version 1. And any mutils load animation. So this is the way they were loading the XML from the resin folder. So mm, uh, they used to create animation through the XML, and they were using these XML files through the animutil load animation class. So this was the common thing they used to do on their version 1 devices, and they were pretty straight on the animation. They had done a hard job at the time, and in the Android version 4 they introduced a new API that was known as vProperty Animator. So in the version 4 or Android, that probably the Jelly Bean, that was the Jelly Bean, not the KitKat. Android 4.4 was the KitKat, but before that Android 4 probably was the yeah, that was the Jelly Bean. So they have introduced on the Jelly Bean, they have introduced view property animator. So that was really great because they had introduced the builder pattern so that the user can create an animation without using any type of XML, and that was awesome. So this is the way they had created. Just for animation, for an example, if you wanna animate a button, so they will call like that button dot animate. So this is the constructor, probably the animate dot blah blah blah, then rotate blah 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 blah. So this is the way they had done it, and they told this thing as the view property animator, and that was introduced on 4.2 or Jelly Bean, and they had introduced a new options, that was the color. So at the time the color can be changed on the runtime by using the animation. And after some probably on that year they have introduced, no, on that on the consequent year they had introduced object animator. So this was also awesome. And nowadays we also use the object animator, so this is really important. I can say, okay, I can mark that as a star right there. Okay, so this is a very common API we are using till now. So this is the object animator, and that was supported, that was also built with what I called, that was also built with the builder pattern, but this was really cool. So we'll talk about, we'll give a proper example about the object animator, how actually we can implement the object animator in API in our own apps. So I'll talk about on my consequent video probably. And so this is the way they were using the thing. For example, object animator, so this was the superclass. So object animator dot, oh no, not the superclass, so this was the builder class. So object animator dot of object dot m button dot comma. So they were by using the object animator they can even access the text color of that button. So this was awesome. But on the view property animator they can only access, or they can only rotate or change the color, so they can use this sort of thing. But on the object animator they have very wide ranges access. For example, you can even change the text color of your button. So this was awesome. Until now that is also that is using, so I'll talk about that. And after that the whole things had changed a lot. On the 4.4 and on the version of Android KitKat, they had introduced a very funny, what's it called, a very useful API for the Android, and that has changed the whole thing. Probably you can say that had changed the whole game for the Android. So they had introduced the scene and transition API. So what actually did that time, and that was, it had introduced a transition, and for that transition they were not using any point or any XML or any XML. So they were using two separate XML, and that was awesome. So I can't really describe this thing from here. I have already created the project for you, so I will discuss on my on my consequent video. So okay, I'm just giving you some overview for that scene and transition API. That is a very useful thing. So I will double my contact with the rate. Oops. So this is a very useful thing. So this had this was known as the scene and transition API. So that was, and it can really work on a single activity. So on a single activity you can really have 2 XML. So this is awesome. So that's why I have written some notes for that. And the way they had controlled this API, or they had given the access of this API through the transition manager, and we can call the transition manager .go method, or even the begin delay transition, and they have almost 4 methods for transition. So this was awesome, and we are using this, so there is no way you can skip that. And yeah, you can use 2 different XML. So there was a like start state and end state. Before the animation has been played, we had used the start scene, and when the animation will be completed we'll use the end scene. So this was the total concept, and there you haven't need to do the calculation like this transform, or sorry, this vector position to this vector position. This is not something like that. You can just design to XML, and then you can animate through the transition. So this was really awesome. This is not the was. I shouldn't use the was. So this is really awesome. And that had introduced another class that was also used on the day, and that's scene.get scene translate that get scene for layout. So this is the way they have and they have introduced another very super thing, and that was the transition inflator. So transition inflator, so this thing is really fun to play with, because they had stored several animation into the transition inflator. This was like a spring or slide, then top slide, then float, and that was awesome. The whole thing was really great, the transition inflator. So you don't have to create the transition by yourself. You can just use any transition inflator that will do the same thing for you. And even if you want to create your own transition, then you can create your own transition by using the res transition. Okay, so this was great on the day. And after that, on the lollipop, they okay, so I have to go there again. Okay, so I have to open my apps. Okay, apps. Yeah. No, not through that. I'm gonna use the paint again. So the transition was very popular. So the Android team was trying to develop this thing. Okay, so what they did on the next version of Android was Lollipop, that was also known as Android SDK 21. Okay, and yeah, and that is also known as Android 5.0. So they have upgraded some properties for the transition. For example, you can see there is some what they call the comparison between two versions of Android. So on the very beginning of the transition, they have introduced fade, auto transition, change bounds, and transition set. And on the consequent version, they have added slide, explode, change clip bounce, change image transition, and change transform. So they have introduced some major thing on the lollipop, and that was the upgrade for the transition. And on the next days, they have introduced the activity transition. So this is a very common thing nowadays. So everybody is using the activity transition whenever we are swiping any activity, and we can see something is moving, or the animation has been played. Okay, so this is really important nowadays, and everybody is using that because that making the app live. Okay, so and on that section they have introduced a lot of things for the activity transition, and there was also twisted, on-state, and on-end, and they have divided the transition, the activity transition, into two different branch. The first one was the content transition, and the second was the share element transition. And the content transition was something like that. We are actually jumping from one activity to another activity without sharing any element or without sharing anything. So that was the content transition. And on the other hand, shared element transition was we were using some element from the previous activity, by using the bundle or put extra, whatever you say, or whatever we are passing through our activity intent. So this is the basic difference between the content transition and shared element transition. They have used they have shared elements through the activity among the activities, and on the content transition they hadn't used any shared elements at all. So both are really important. Some of them need element shared properties, and some doesn't need that. And they have introduced some very powerful classes that that makes this whole thing more powerful, like Interpolator, and this is the way they have introduced they have added the animation to get into the set intertransition. So there is something like that. So I will tell. Okay, I'm just discussing that. So let's just think you have two activity, the activity A and activity B. So you are jumping from activity A to activity B, and in here there is two state we can see from jumping A to B, the exit A and enter B, as well as from getting back from B to A. There is also two state right there, so the return B and re-enter A. And these all of them state you can add animation. For example, you can add animation, not exactly animation, you can add multiple animation for a single state. So you can add some animation for the state exit A, as well as you can add some animation for entering into activity B, something like that. So this was great. And there were control through activity intent and back intent, something like that. And you can really set this animation through this what I call that might be the constructor or might be the builder, something like that. So set intertransition and blah blah, set exit transition, or set return transition, or set re-enter transition, something like that. So they have some method for every state. So you can use multiple animation for every single state, and that has made these things alive. And that is great on the days. And I will give two separate videos for the content transition as well as the shared element transition. So this is all about the basic for the animation or the motion on Android. So this is all about today. See you on the consequent video. So good to see you then. Bye.